Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm John Higgins, contributing writer to Film and TV Now, and I'm delighted to welcome one and all to this interview special with Lydia Mark, who can currently be seen on Paramount Plus in the series Ghosts of Beirut. Lydia has shown tremendous promise and has generated a lot of interest from her peers and filmmakers. Lydia, warm welcome to you.
Thank you for having me, John. Very excited to be here. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you.
Good.
So let's tell, so I haven't seen the show, but I just wanted, could you tell us a bit more about what your role is in Ghosts of Beirut?
Yeah, sure. So Ghosts of Beirut is an espionage thriller and one of my favorite projects to work on. It was so exciting, very fast paced. It's a mini series. It's based off of a true story, actually, of the CIA and Mossad's joint hunt to find Imad Mugnier, who was a bubbling political leader at the time, who was scaring them a lot because a lot of plots were happening and the introduction of things like suicide bombers as well. It was a very troubling time. So this story is the 25-year manhunt for this guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's from what I've heard of it, it seemed what you've told me now, it reminds me of Munich, the Steven Spielberg film with Daniel Craig and Eric Bana. So certainly I will be interested in checking it out because there's a lot of these movies and TV series at the moment. John Krasinski does Jack Ryan, which I did see a couple of
Love that
episodes,
show.
which I saw a couple of episodes of the London Action Festival recently. So what was the spark that got you interested in an acting career?
Oh gosh, what was the spark? I think acting is something that's kind of followed me my whole life. Followed me, and I've not really wanted to answer it, if that makes sense. I remember when I was younger, the reason, for example, for me starting off at drama school was because growing up in London, there's not really that much to do. Sometimes you're just like, oh, I just want to pass away the weekend. And my mum was like, right, you can go to this weekend drama school if you take your sister. So that was the caveat. So I was like, right, let's do that. We'll take sister and then we'll go for a little weekend acting class. And it had no structure whatsoever. It was like a bunch of kids just running around in costumes and doing art. But there was something about it, something about the chaos and just being free that I just really loved. So I was like, right, this is interesting. Let me keep doing this for a while. And then I remember I would dabble with university and like doing a regular job and stuff like that. But then I think acting would always be that annoying bug that would just kind of be like, hey, over here. So then I remember I auditioned for this, the Almeida Theatre, like a touring company, and I was doing that, and it was part of devising work. So we got to write our own stuff and perform it. So I was like, okay, this is interesting, and I'll do that. And then I think it kind of spiraled from there, and the bug bit me again. So then I was like, okay, let me try and apply for drama school. I've heard about all these people applying for drama school. They've told me how scary it is, how many schools you need to apply for. But I was like, yeah, I don't really have the money to go for a million auditions. I'm just going to apply to one or two. And people, like, I knew that was crazy already from what I'd heard. So I was like, I'll apply to one or two. And I ended up getting into the two that I applied for. So I was like, right, okay, kind of need to listen to this. Maybe there's something there. And from there, I just started the journey, did drama school, finished that. And the pandemic was a tough time for artists, but managed to get through that as well, thankfully. And it's just been like an upwards climb since there, and amazing things have just been taken off.
Mm-hmm. But what was interesting, you talked about the pandemic. Are there any specific challenges that you initially faced? Because you went on this specific journey and you tried it out, and then the bugs sort of bit you on the shoulder, I suppose. What
Yeah.
sort of challenges did you sort of initially face?
The challenge of, oh my God, am I going to be completely destitute? And it was a tough time because especially when you first graduate drama school, you have that 1 year where you're hot property now. Everyone's interested, everyone's excited, you're fresh. So there was that element. And then suddenly when all of that forward motion is there and all of that impetus is there, but you also don't have anything to keep going with because there is no industry. And it was everyone. Now, I guess our industry are kind of in a type of pandemic with the strikes. But back then, it was so much more different because nobody could do anything. And you feel kind of stuck because you're like, well, this is my chance. I've just came out and I've got all this energy and all this motivation and inspiration to bring to the industry, but there's no outlet. So that was really tough. And it was just about keeping focused and falling in love with the craft again, in the sense that, okay, I would try and film scenes with my partner, or I would write stuff, or I would just try and get myself on tape as much as possible. Even if no one was asking me to come on tape, I would put myself on tape. I would watch myself and critique myself. I would do like mini auditions, if you will, just anything to keep you in love with the thing that you first started doing. I think that was the way that got me through the pandemic. And with that, I was able to set myself up for a lot of the stuff that I'm experiencing now.
Mm-hmm. So, given the demands of filmmaking, I mean, you've already said that you love working on Ghosts of Beirut. I mean, is this something that you'd rather work on in the future, or are you looking to do more narrative features, like what single features, or would you be interested in franchises like some of the stuff that's out there at the moment? What sort of things are you preferring to look forward to?
I think for me, it's always the story. The story is the most crucial part of any project that I do. Ghosts of Beirut was such an incredible story because it was very fast paced, but also it was something that kind of spoke about human nature and human psychology, and in a sense that there were no bad guys and there were no good guys, because there isn't sometimes in life. There is this gray space in between. The Americans weren't the good guys, the Arabs weren't the bad guys, but everyone had a bit of everything. And I think that is more true to life. And that is the reason why we have such conflicting problems going on in the world, because people always bring their humanity to stuff. We're not black and white. And I think that is the most important aspect for me as an artist. And that's what I love to explore. So whether that comes in a long form narrative or multi seasons, or I mean, you should be lucky enough to get a multi season show these days. But whether that's the case or not, I think for me, it's always about the story. I wouldn't say no to a huge franchise or anything like that, as long as the people making it were convinced and in love with the story. It's not enough to just put something out there because it has huge IP or because it has a following or a book series. We've seen that happen so often. And right now it's happening quite a lot in our industry, where people are turning their back on creating authentic stories. And that's what moves people. That's what makes people go to the cinema. And those are the kinds of jobs that I want to be a part of, regardless of the format.
Okay. So obviously, as an actor, I mean, you say you write your own stuff. I mean, do you have a specific method of getting into a character, or are you more reliant on a director and writer guiding you with the demands of a part?
Do you know, when I left drama school, I think I came out of it thinking, right, this is the technique, this is what I've learned, this is what I need to do, kind of thing. And as the years go on, you start to realize that, wait, hang on a minute, I'm an individual. I can choose what works for me, and I can actually turn my back on something that doesn't work for me. And I feel like when you're at drama school, there is a culture of this is how it's done, this is how you do it. But I think you always need to figure out what works best for you. And I think I always listen to lots of other actors and more experienced actors as well. And they're all kind of saying a similar thing, in a sense of like, it's not about creating this character. It's about finding this person. In the same way I would get to know you. I would get to know what's John's favorite food, what makes John tick, what does he worry about when he goes to sleep at night. Those are the questions that I started to ask myself as an actor. And rather than creating a character, I was like, I'm going to find this person. I'm going to find out about them. I'm going to find out how they talk and how they move, all of it based off of what I find in the script, in combination with my imagination and perhaps things that I've seen. I was actually listening to a really good podcast with John Voight was on it. And he was talking about the way he finds characters. And he said something like he just daydreams. And I was like, that's so brilliant. He just daydreams and he just thinks deeply about the character. And that's something that I had started doing as well, but I didn't have a name for it. I kind of would just think about the character, and if they were a person, what would make them tick? What would they be worried about? What would be their motivation? I have a motivation for wanting to be an actor. So what is Susan's motivation for wanting to catch this guy that is terrorizing the Americans, you know? So I think that's where it comes from a place of not trying to put your own ideas on a character, but rather let the character reveal themselves to you from the script.
So, I mean, diversity and gender are big issues at the moment. I mean, inevitably with Me Too and Times Up, the effect of that and Weiss and everything else. I mean, where do you feel progress has been made, and where do you feel work still needs to be done? I mean, it's a common question I ask a lot of people. I'm just curious to know what your take on it is.
I think the industry has moved on quite a lot, actually. And I will say that in the sense of even the kinds of roles that I've been offered lately, it's not so much of, I remember when I was like going to drama school and like looking at scenes and the stuff that was on TV. For example, Black women were constantly playing like a girl from the blocks or someone who's been down and out, or maybe her partner's a drug dealer or whatever, you know. And there is a place for shows like that. There is a place for shows like I love Top Boy, you know, that's great. And that is set in that kind of lifestyle and in that kind of environment. But Black people or people of color can also be regular lawyers. They can be consultants. They can be doctors. They can have husband troubles or wife troubles. They can have kid troubles. They can have, big life questions. And I think we need to get to a place where we see all types of people playing all types of roles and not necessarily being in something because of the color of their skin or their background. So I think once the industry is able to see all people in many different walks of life, because the guy on the street, he just happens to be a Black man, but he identifies first as a lawyer. You know, he just happens to be Black. And I think that's the shift that needs to happen in TV and film, which is happening. But I think there's still a bit more ways to go in the sense of like, a person just exists. You know, sometimes we don't need to reference their color or their identity or anything like that. We can just tell a story with that person just existing in the same way that they just exist in life, you know? And there is also a place for struggle stories, stories about slavery, stories about your struggles, perhaps if you identify differently, maybe you're non-binary or something. There are a place for stories like that. But there's also a place for stories where humans are just humans. And I think that's where the industry needs to get to.
Yeah, I mean, Barbara Streisand summed it up when she presented the award for Best Director to Clint Eastwood, and she said, I don't want people to think of male or female directors. I just want people to be thought of as directors. And I think,
exactly.
in a way, I was speaking to my friend Rel Dowdle about this. We were talking about defining what African-American cinema was. And what was interesting was that we were just talking on the level about filmmaking per se. That was what it was. And it's an interesting reflection you have there, Lydia. So thank you very much for sharing this with us.
Thank you.
Yeah. So given that some actors become multi-hyphenates, I mean, you've already said that you write. I mean, do you see yourself directing, producing, and writing your own roles and projects in the long-term future?
Yeah, I think I'll never say never. I mean, directing is not something that it's in my immediate future, but sometimes you can kind of see just little pangs of it here and there, and you're just like, oh, okay, if I was in charge here, I would perhaps do this, or I would show this aspect more. And I think that just comes with falling in love and being in love with what you do. I think when you love what you do, you're always going to find ways to develop it. You're always going to find ways to get better at it. So I think it is a natural progression that we see loads of actors becoming directors because we spend so much time on set. We spend so much time working with directors, and we also have a way that we see the story. Of course, when we're on a project, we always want to fulfill our director's vision because that's our job. But we also see things in certain ways. And it's amazing if you do get to work with a director that's like, no, I trust you. Go ahead and and show what you want to show. And I think, but then there's also that element of it that you're like, oh, but if I was doing it, I'd do it this way, you know? So I think that's definitely something I want to explore. I think writing is something that has been a big part of my life. I think I went to drama school and did an MA, but my BA was in English and creative writing. So for me, I think it was always something that works really well together. But at the time, I just didn't know it. I thought it was one or the other. And I think there's also a kind of stigma with, perhaps there was before the pandemic, there's a stigma with being hyphenated, especially as an actor, because it kind of draws this opinion from people that, oh, well, you failed. Or, oh, well, you're not successful, you know, because you've had to move outside the box. And I remember I had to grapple with that as well, thinking that, no, because you are exploring a different avenue and because you are exploring a different part of the same machine, this is only a way for you to get better at your craft. Because if I'm a writer and I'm writing the words that I'm going to say or someone else is going to say, therefore I get another understanding of that. And then I think as I started to write characters more, it started to affect my acting, because then I was like, this is what casting directors want to see, because these are my words and I would love someone to bring it to life, not in a particular way, but I would love them to just bring it to life, you know? And that is what casting directors want from us as actors. They want us to bring these characters to life. That's why they ask for us. That's why actors are so important, because we're able to write the music in between the lines, you know? And I think as I became more multi-hyphenated, I understood the industry in a whole bigger picture. I mean, actors were a big part, but we're also a small part as well. So I think once you're able to get in the nitty gritty of what that creative process starts with, I really think that it all kind of just blends really well together. So I think there's definitely the potential to do more. And I do really want to explore the creation side of it as well, and not just the acting side of it.
So obviously we talk about work-life balance in the world, and I'm just
Mm.
curious to know, I mean, are there hobbies and interests that you have outside of the acting that kind of that allow you to switch off and relax? I mean, you talked about John Boyd there talking about daydreaming, but you know, in terms of the demands and pressures, because again, it's an uncertain business anyway, because you don't, there is this thing, you don't know where the next job's coming from. So are there things that kind of stimulate you in a non-acting context that kind of give you inspiration and stimulus?
Yeah, I think that's such a great question because it's prevalent right now. A lot of artists are having to go on strike and are not able to make a living off of what they do. So I think the first thing is always self-care. That was something I always ignored before. I'm a very determined person. So I was like, no, the next thing, do the next thing, graduate here, go here. I always had a plan. And I think a lot of that has served me well because I have been able to keep climbing an upwards trajectory, which is very fortunate as well. And I'm very grateful for that. But at the same time, there needs to be an element of just stopping sometimes and just thinking about other ways that you can fulfill your dreams and other ways that you can bring some sort of light or lightness or joy into your life. There's other ways to do that. And I think it's about discovering and I was not, of course you think, okay, you're born to act or whatever, or maybe you're not born to act or however you feel about it. But I think there is always something that you can do that will bring you joy that isn't a career, that isn't something that you do, if that makes sense. Because, for example, when you go to networking events, people always say, oh, what do you do? So the first thing we do to quantify ourselves is to tell people what we do, you know? And then if that thing is taken away from you, and then suddenly a lot of people find themselves in crisis because they think, and I was one of those people, they think, well, if I'm not doing the thing that I say I am, what am I? Kind of thing, you know? And it's about understanding that you are an independent person out of this. So I thought to myself, what is the thing that you love to do? That if you take away the actor label, what is the thing? I love to tell stories. And I can tell stories in a plethora of ways. I can write a story, I can sing a story, I can paint a story. So for me, I started just doing things that I love, like going out for nature. If I see a person on the street, I make up a story about them in my head. I don't need to tell them, but it's a story and it keeps me creative, you know? I read as well. I love to read, but when I was studying it, it became a chore and I didn't want to read anymore. But now I'm like, okay, I found the enjoyment in reading again. I found the enjoyment in reading Shakespeare because there is something there. So I think for me, it's just going back to what are the things that interested you in this industry? What are the things that made you want to do it? And it's to tell stories. So now I just find other ways to do that and other ways to bring joy into my life that's not just standing on set and saying words and getting paid for it.
Okay, well, I'm gonna wrap up with two final questions to go on. So the first one is who would you like to most work with in the future? And what are you most proud of about your career to date?
Who would I love to most work with? I love Darren Aronofsky. He's one of my favorite directors. I just love the way he just gets under your skin and you're just constantly living with that paranoia of just, and also the exploration of the human psyche as well. Like Whale, it wasn't a huge film in a sense of there was nothing major going on. There was no car chases, there were no elaborate set pieces or anything like that. It was just a guy experiencing life and dealing with what he was dealing with. So those are the kinds of stories I want to tell, and those are the kinds of directors I want to work with. On the acting term, I love Viola Davis. A lot of people have actually told me that I remind them of her, which is the biggest compliment. And I love her. I think she's a fantastic storyteller. She's someone I'd love to work with. And what was your next question?
My final question is, what are you most proud of?
What am I most proud of? Just keeping going. That's what I'm most proud of, in a sense that there are many, many times in this industry where you want to quit. There are many times when you get jaded, but I think I've always gone back to, why do I love this thing? What can I bring to this thing? You know, because sometimes as actors, we always want to think about us and think about, oh, you know, I want to get this job or I want to do this thing, but maybe flip it around. And what I started doing is thinking, well, how can I help? How can I serve? And I think the fact that I'm able to consistently do this job with the massive ups and downs, I think that is what makes me most proud, because I think I'm doing it for the right reasons. And I will continue to do it because I know that I can help people in this way. I mean, I'm not a doctor, but I can entertain you. So I think that's something I'm proud of, just not giving up.
Okay. Well, Lydia, I think it's been an absolute pleasure learning about your craft and your insights and your journey today. I think it's brilliant. I mean, you seem to have a really solid pair of shoulders, and it's a thrill to, you know, we've met a couple of times before, but I mean, it's great to always say hello to you. You always bring a lot of energy and sunshine and positivity. So I salute you for that. And it's great. So thanks for your time and insights today. Just wrapping up, Ghosts of Beirut is, as mentioned, is on Paramount Plus. So please do check that out at your local streaming services, wherever it is. And please do keep your eyes open for Lydia's next projects as and when they bow. Just wrapping up about myself, you can see more interviews like this via my YouTube channel, John Higgins Film Review. And please go to www.filmandtvnow.com for other content and reviews I've done. And also, please check out my film resource website, www.whatmovie.co.uk. And on that note, thank you again, Linda. And thank you very much for watching.
Thank you, John. Hope you have a great day. Really great questions as well. Such a pleasure.
Thank you.